Hello and welcome to the bookshelf at the Institute of South Asian Studies, Singapore, where we look at books pertinent to South Asia. My name is Nithya Subramanian and I'm an editor at the Institute. Today, we'll be discussing the book titled The RSS and the Making of the Deep Nation with author Dinesh Narayanan. The book is an objective and non-partisan account of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. It dives deep into the stand taken by the RSS on the watershed moments of India, while cogently demystifying the organization and destroying many myths related to it. Dinesh, who is a senior assistant editor at the Economic Times, covers in this book a wide range of topics from Hindutva to economics, Kerala to gender inequality in the RSS. Thank you, Dinesh, for joining us today.
Hello, Nithya. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Let me start by the very obvious question. What prompted you to write a book on the RSS and how did it come about, considering the fact that you've been a long-time economic journalist?
Yeah. In fact, this was sometime in 2012. 2012, I was the bureau chief of Forbes magazine in Delhi. And we usually publish a cover story, a special issue actually, for Independence Day. And we had a cover story, we had commissioned a cover story from this person called Sandeep Vaslekar, who runs a think tank called Strategic Foresight. And he had written a very interesting piece called Should India Aspire to be a Superpower or Should We Aspire to be a Great Nation? And that was a take on a book he had published then, which had a similar theme. Then his book was translated into Hindi, and that was being released by Mohan Bhagwat. Coincidentally, Sandeep is not a RSS man, but events turned out in such a way that the book was released by Mohan Bhagwat. That is the first time I met Mohan Bhagwat, and when I met him, he seemed to be a very interesting person. I had not paid too much attention to the RSS for a very long period of time, but I have a past association in the sense that my uncle is an RSS man, and he is a senior leader in the RSS, which is there in the acknowledgements as well. And several members of my family have been part of the RSS. In fact, even I have been to a Shakha when I was in school. So I knew this organization a little bit, but after school, I don't think I never had a contact. And this man suddenly pops up on the radar unexpectedly, and at a time which was very crucial for India as well. And what he was speaking based on Sandeep Vaslekar's book was also very interesting. Another time, if you remember, 2012, when India was going through some very tough times financially as well as strategically, and there was a lot of churn abroad as well. Obama was seeking a second term. It was August, and the US was getting into the election mode. So things were changing. There was a lot of change there after Obama's speech about hope. It was a very potent sort of idea which was coursing through the world. And that is the time when he was talking about something like that. And, when it comes to an organization which we strongly believe that is a nationalist organization and all that, and that suddenly comes up and says that India should maybe not be a superpower, but maybe a great nation. It's a very interesting thought. So then when I left Forbes, I pitched a story to Caravan magazine, a cover story, said, let's profile this person, who nobody really knows about. And Caravan agreed. And in the run-up to the 2014 national election, I wrote this cover story called RSS 3.0 for Caravan. And that story was probably the first time when the mainstream media had really done a fairly long piece on Mohan Bhagwat and in a manner which sort of portrayed that organization as the driving force behind BJP and Narendra Modi, which was making a play at power. And the tagline of that, the strapline of that story was that RSS brings BJP to the cusp of power. And as it turned out, the election that was slightly prescient. And then after that, Mohan Bhagwat has been a fairly well-known figure in India, abroad, everywhere, and RSS has also been very much in the limelight since then. So 3 years ago, a book was always there. It was only a question of time. And since I was in a full-time job, it was slightly difficult. So when Penguin pitched a book and wanted to commission one, I readily accepted it.
Okay.
So that's how the book came about, the timing of the book.
Yes. So we'll talk about Kerala a little later, but the book gives us a good insight into the relationship between the BJP and the RSS, which has been rocky in many parts. How would you describe it in today's context?
Yeah, so that's one thing which is one of the objectives of my writing the book, because people see the RSS and BJP as separate organizations with separate functions and all that. But uh, the way I looked at the RSS and the Sangha Parivar as a whole, I look at the RSS as the chief brain trust of this Parivar and the sort of bedrock of Hindu nationalist thought in India. BJP is an arm of the RSS, and since the BJP is largely controlled by people and crucial decisions are always taken in consultation with the RSS. And see, how do you differentiate between a BJP and an RSS when the most important leaders of the BJP were always RSS pracharaks? So they are RSS men. So there is no real distinction between the BJP and RSS ideologically. And training-wise, they're all RSS trained. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi is trained in the RSS, ideologically as well as operationally. A lot of things which he has learned. Even in elections, the idea of Panna Pramukh comes from the RSS. The way RSS spread its wings in nationally. So as the way I look at it, RSS is probably one of the most efficient and low-cost ways of mobilizing people. And you see, it's a huge organization, but it runs at a very low cost. All the people work voluntarily, and they all pay from their own pockets, except for the pracharaks who get their expenses reimbursed. The rest of them all work voluntarily, and money comes to the organization. That the organization doesn't spend money, you know. And even for the other arms of the organizations, they raise their own money. A lot of projects, like for example, RSS runs about 150, 160, sorry, I think now the count is about 175,000 projects. Each of them are financed by their own strength or locally, whatever is the whoever runs it, they finance it. The main organization doesn't really pitch in there.
So moving on to Narendra Modi, your book does tell us that Narendra Modi was not didn't have much backing from the top RSS brass, but he was obviously popular amongst the cadre. And now he's become a personality cult, something which the RSS doesn't favor. So what are your thoughts on the current equation between Modi and the RSS when he's become such a cult figure, which was obvious in the Bihar elections as well recently?
It would not be entirely right to say that the RSS was against him, even when he was that, or the leadership was against him. A section of the leadership, yes, but not the entire leadership. Otherwise, he would not have got the backing. So the strongest backing came from Mohan Bhagwat himself, even much before 2014, or even before 2012. He had backed Narendra Modi right from the beginning. And once you get that kind of backing from the head of the organization, and an organization which is highly disciplined and follows the chain of command to the last T, it's only natural that others would fall in line once a decision is taken. And of course, it always helped that Narendra Modi was highly popular with the masses as well as their cadres. The second point about the personality cult, that is one of the reasons why a section of the leadership had even originally opposed his candidature as prime minister. And you could see that opposition even earlier when he was chief minister of Gujarat. And there were a lot of times when a local RSS had opposed him vociferously. And there were a lot of clashes in Gujarat itself between the chief minister and many RSS leaders there. Prominent among them, Sanjay Joshi. And Joshi's ouster is pretty well recorded right now. And uh, now, now I think the prime minister has gone beyond all that. His popularity and his image has transcended these minor quibbles, and he sort of stands right above all of them as far as the organization is concerned. And I don't think the RSS is today in a position to question him in any manner, and which is what I mentioned in the book also, that when somebody questions the personality cult, the RSS leaders at that meeting tell him that, you don't have to worry about that. I mean, we are here if anything of that sort happens.
So how would you describe their relationship in terms of interference? Do you think the Sangh does not interfere in the functioning of the BJP and the Indian government?
I don't think so. I mean, if the prime minister himself is an RSS man, then there is no question of interference, right? I mean, it's their agenda being implemented. This is something which I have been trying to impress again and again in the book, that there is no real difference once ideologically a person is fully converted and then he is given a job. In this case, from the RSS point of view, the job of prime ministership has fallen on Narendra Modi. And again, Mohan Bhagwat and others have said that he's an RSS Swayamsevak, and he would do as prime minister what needs to be done, but ideologically he will remain pure, and he will do within the framework of that ideology. This has been said again and again, and so there is no real when we talk about interference. What really does interference mean? If you mean by that if there is a decision of, let's say, an appointment or a policy decision, does RSS interfere in that? My point is, it doesn't need to. It already has its people working its agenda within the government, right from prime minister downwards, even in the bureaucracy, which is something which I mentioned, that they have an organization which specifically targets and builds the cadre of bureaucrats, which it then sends to the government. So you have your people who are ideologically trained by you, sometimes even otherwise trained by you, who are going into key positions and carrying out your agenda. So you already know what, as an RSS man, if you go into the government, you already know what needs to be done, and that agenda gets automatically. So one of the examples of that, when the CAA NRC happened, and before that the Kashmir bifurcation happened. Everybody knows that Kashmir has been on the agenda, RSS agenda, for a very long time, and the bifurcation was also on the RSS agenda for a very long time, and the government merely carried it out. So it's very difficult to say that RSS interfered in that when its own agenda got carried out. And the same goes for a CA and RC as well. So Mohan Bhagwat said in his Vijayadashmi speech just now, last month, that is very much part of the agenda. And this is something which Amit Shah repeated in Bengal recently in his speech.
Yes.
So you see how it percolates down or percolates up, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yes, so true. On the economic policy, now the Modi government has been propagating the Atmanirbhar Bharat. So how does it tie in with the RSS ideology of Swadeshi? We know that the RSS had initially, of course, opposed liberalization, but obviously the subsequent BJP governments took it forward. So how does this tie in? How does their ideology tie in with the Atmanirbhar Bharat ideology or slogan that Modi is talking about?
So as an ideology, I think both at the RSS thought level, what Swadeshi should be remains on paper, and even in the government's program as well. That's sort of transplanted that idea. So as a labeling mechanism, it has worked. And the idea that a lot of what we should be doing. So, for example, in terms of trade policy. So, in trade policy, we did not join RCEP, right? Now, it is something which is also projected as part of the Atmanirbharta which they are seeking. At the same time, a lot of trade specialists in India say that it's a good thing, right? That we didn't join RCEP. Now, that RCEP was essentially a deal which was loaded against the country. Now, this is something which they have effectively used. They have used it as an Atmanirbhar Bharat theme and said that we cannot compromise on our own people and our own industry and give away a lot of benefits to other countries. You see, it ties up very smoothly into the narrative. But whether it was fully thought through and what needs to be done, but then we are also talking about an FTA with the US, right? Now, how does one become Atmanirbhar and not the other? Now, it's an interesting question, right? So, in terms of labeling, in terms of the idea, in terms of the principle behind it, maybe to some extent, but I think pretty much everybody knows it is not as practical as they say, because the reality of trade and the reality of global economics is something else altogether.
That's so true, absolutely. Um, uh, Spouting slogans is different from getting things moving on the ground.
Absolutely.
Yes. Now we'll move on to the organizational skills of the RSS. You know, your book, there's a very interesting part on the Surya Foundation and the Samkalp for civil service aspirants. I mean, it was something that I learned new while reading the book. But there's also this bit where you've spoken about the RSS adapting to social media in a big way. So, what do you think are the implications of this transformation from an introvert backroom organization to a more open one?
So from what I know, from within the organization, there is a recognition that okay, here we have managed to capture power on our own, and this is the best dispensation we can get for the organization. And it's in the organization's interest to perpetuate it as much as possible and get as much benefit from it. You may not be able to get all the 10 things you wanted to get done, but you may be able to get about 6 of them done. If it was another government, maybe we were not even able to get through even one. So they have sorry, they have this realization. Now that you have done that, you feel that you are going to be here for a while and going to be the power in power for a while. It's a good time to be open about it. The organization has enough strength that it can stand on it. I mean, unlike 70s when Indira Gandhi could stamp it down, or earlier when Nehru could do it, there's nobody really in sight who can do that. So naturally, they feel that no, it's sort of it's time we came out, and there is a change in the way people engage with the RSS also today, right? So it's very difficult to get somebody, a young person, for 10 years continuously to come into the evening shakha every day for an hour. So they've been very quick to adapt to that, and social media has been a very good tool for them to propagate the ideology. So they know that they might not be able to make people play kabaddi anymore for an hour, but they would be able to engage them intellectually or in conversations. So the the focus and the methodology is now focusing more on engaging people in conversations and engaging them intellectually, and also targeting community leaders and others who have leadership in society, and getting them to your side so that they can then go ahead and naturally, when it comes to social media influencers, you try to get them on their side, or you create social media influencers who would do that for you. Either way, it works for them. So social media, actually has worked as a very good tool for them for not only mobilization but also expansion.
So what you're trying to say is also that the RSS has been is not just an old people's party. I mean, it has been able to infuse a lot of new blood and young blood using social media. So that has become a very important
Oh,
tool for them to regenerate and reinvent themselves. Would that be a correct assumption?
yes, yes, certainly, they have been able to attract a whole lot of young people. And see, the thing is that the moment they moved from sloppy looking shorts to crisp trousers, that was a big change. So there's a very interesting incident somebody told. So 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when they switched from shorts to trousers, that year the Vijayadashmi function, there were a whole lot more guests who were willing to come and sit there because they were wearing trousers. Until then, a whole lot of people were ideologically, yes, they were part of the RSS, they might go to a shaka and all that, but they were very reluctant to wear the shorts in public.
Yes.
Now that's gone. And so nowadays, it doesn't even matter unless you're going to a shaka or very few occasions when you have to participate in a drill, you have to wear the uniform. Otherwise, you don't even need to wear the uniform, right? Most of the times, people are in jeans and t-shirts. So this change has, and plus social media. So anybody who has a slight inclination towards the ideology can immediately be on Twitter or Facebook and engage with these people. So then it becomes so they have a lot of virtual shakas and stuff like that, and Millans and whatnot.
So now
Definitely attracting a lot of young people. Yes.
moving on to your own home state of Kerala. I mean, I enjoyed the little anecdote, your personal experience that you shared with us. Uh, but why hasn't the BJP been able to make a dent in Kerala when RSS has the most number of shakhas in that state?
That's because the biggest Hindu party in Kerala is the CPM.
Okay.
That's the reason. Uh, it's not a casual statement. It is the biggest Hindu party. So the 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 caste politics of Kerala is very different from the caste politics of other states, and the Chaturvarnya is not very well defined in Kerala. So, for example, you don't have the Vaishya community in Kerala, which is that role is fulfilled by the Christian community or the Muslim community or the Chettiars or the people from Karnataka who have moved into Kerala. Um, that largely you are landowning a peasant community of Nayars and Iravas. So the caste politics of Kerala is very different, and CPM has benefited from this peculiar caste formation of Kerala from the beginning, and it has and because the church was against communism, and there was a large section which supported the Congress party. So whether it right from the time the first EMS government was formed in Kerala, from then there has been this constant friction with the church. So there was this community politics which was playing out in Kerala, which meant that the CPM attracted most of the Hindus uh, here. Some the Congress attracted some. So this politics and the changing economics of Kerala, which I am not getting into from um, a landowning peasantry and agricultural community towards a more uh, cash crop oriented
Yes.
uh, farming, and then now a lot of trading and business. So that has also changed the economics and the power structures in Kerala, has affected the power structures in Kerala in a way. So and BJP has never been able to. So RSS did. RSS did because it had the shakhas and from the 40s onwards, and uh, it managed to create these small bunches of attract small bunch of people everywhere across the state. but it never managed to convert a whole lot of people who were ideologically closer to the Communist Party. So once, so it was a question of this was an extremely right of center ideology. The other one was the extremely left of center ideology. I mean, very left of center ideology. So it was a question of getting somebody from right across the aisle to right here. It was very difficult for them. Now it's happening slowly, actually.
And finally, another interesting point that was raised in your book is the issue of gender equality and the lack of women representation in the RSS. So, do you think the RSS is taking any steps to correct this? Is this something on their agenda going forward?
I don't think they will ever induct women into the main body. But there is a lot of it's keeping women away. There is a possibility they might just induct one into the leadership or two people into the leadership, but I don't see them getting a whole lot of women into the shakhas at least. There's no way. It's possible that as the organization's mobilization strategies change and they become more amenable to women, for example, social media strategies. So if you're going to have meetings online, or if you're not going to have a lot of activity which doesn't involve being together in a shakha space, it might happen, and there is a lot of interaction happening in some of the other events which they conduct. Plus, there is another organization called the Rashtriya Sevika Samiti and Stree Shakti. So there are these two organizations which are exclusively for women, and their stand so far has been that those are enough. You don't need to have women in the main RSS anyway. I think that policy is going to continue for a while at least. I don't think they're going to change it. It is a male organization without doubt. Its DNA is very, very much male-centric. Its conception of the organization also, even though they say Bharat Mata, it's very masculine, right?
Yes. Thank you so much, Dinesh, for this wonderful conversation, and thank you for joining us at our book discussion.
Thank you, Nithya. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. It was a great opportunity to be here.